Hello, LinkedIn. Hope you're doing well. I have a couple of talking points here. So, I have been coaching network engineers since approximately 2013, 8 years now. I've coached hundreds of, if not thousands, of network engineers, and many people. I I consistently hear that I didn't get hired because I didn't have the skills, or I didn't have the experience, and that's not, in my opinion, that's not necessarily true, because if you didn't have the skills, you didn't have the experience, you will not make it to the on-site interview. You will not make it to the final round. So, what hiring managers are looking for, yes, they are looking for the technical skills, but there are things that are far more important, because hiring managers can always train for skill. So there are things that are far more important. If you're making it to the interview, if someone's calling you and talking to you for 10, 15 minutes on the phone, it means you have the skills and you have the experience. It's on the resume. So if you're not progressing beyond that point, it's something else. So today I'm going to talk about what hiring managers are and recruiters are looking for, things that are probably things that are probably far more important than the technical skills. One is ability to communicate, and I'm going to explain um, how communication varies. You can have three network engineers who accomplished the exact same task, completed the exact same project successfully, but then when they communicate, they have different communication styles. And communication is important because managers are looking for someone who can communicate. That's very important. So, one person can say, I configured a router. Simple as that. I configured a router. Another person can say, which really doesn't tell the hiring manager much, because all network engineers configure routers at some point in their careers. So one engineer can say, I configured routers. And that's a very um, uh, simplified way of talking about your projects and your achievements in an interview. Another person can say, yeah, I mean, I successfully configured routers. A third person can say, I was configuring a router, the command wasn't there on the Cisco iOS. I read the configuration guides and the command reference documents at cisco.com. The command wasn't there. I worked with um, the Cisco development teams. These are the guys that write the code, write the iOS, and they didn't have an explanation. I stayed up until 4 in the morning reading RFCs, and I learned that the feature was valid and the command should be there. I worked with Cisco. Um, they submitted an enhancement, and the command was introduced on the next software release. We upgraded our routers, and I was able to configure the router. The exact same project, a totally different story. So, communication is very important. How you tell your story is also extremely important. Not everyone is great at storytelling. You can work with someone. There are people who specialize in these kind of things. Work with someone, tell them exactly what you did, be open about the work you completed, and they'll help you with the story. The stories are important because communication is important, and that's what hiring managers and recruiters are looking for. And um, and So your stories should tell the hiring manager that based on your prior experience, you are able to bring value to the company. And many people can bring a lot of value, but they don't know how to reflect that value through their stories. So work with someone, have a perfect story, you'll land the job sooner. Another example of communication is, let's say someone worked overseas. He's a network engineer, and many of my clients are international clients, meaning they were overseas, they had their education overseas, they had their Cisco certifications elsewhere, they have experience from another country, they come to the States, and their challenge is finding a job in America. So someone can have experience overseas, and then on an interview they'll say, "Hey, I worked for Canar Telecom." Recruiter, hiring manager, they don't know what Canar is. They haven't heard of Canar. But then someone else can say, "I worked for Canar, largest ISP in the MENA region." MENA region is the Middle East and North Africa region. So I worked for Canar, as you know, as you probably know, the largest ISP in Middle East and North Africa. And our clients were British Telecom, this ISP, that ISP. So now you're speaking the language of the hiring manager and the recruiter, and they'll understand what Canar is. But just going to an interview and saying, "Yes, I worked as a network engineer for 3 years at Canar," no one knows who Canar is. So being able to communicate is very important. Also, there are achievement-oriented words like succeed, master, win. There are competence priming words like efficient, productive, leverage. So I'm not saying if these words don't reflect who you truly are, there's no point in saying these words on an interview, because it's not going to be congruent with who you are. It's your words have to be a true expression of who you are. So I'm not saying learn some words just for the sake of saying these words on an interview. But if a word really expresses who you are, then yes, make sure you emphasize that word and even repeat that word on an interview. So, for example, the word success has meaning to me. I've been mentioning the word success long before I learned it's an achievement oriented word, long before learning anything about these categories of words. But the word success is it has meaning to me. It's part of who I am. It's how I see things. It's how I evaluate things. And I always ask myself, have I been successful in this project? After any task, I ask myself, have I been successful? Have I completed the work successfully? Even when I send a message to my managers, I usually say, when I send an email, and I usually say project completed successfully. It's just a word I naturally use. On interviews, I can be talking about a project and how we completed the project, and then I'll say, it was a huge success for myself because I learned a lot. It was a huge success for the company, and it was a huge success for a client. So I'm emphasizing repeating that word before knowing anything about achievement-oriented words, because it's part of who I am. And the same applies to you. Understand what words have meaning to you, what words are a true expression of who you are, and at the same time, they have an impact on the listener. And then emphasize these words, repeat them multiple times throughout the interview. Trust. We have it on the dollar. I don't need to say anymore. In God we trust. So there are words that have an impact, and that impact will be multiplied if these words are a true expression of you, your experience, and so on. So, a communication. So, the summary of everything I said is you probably have great experience. Make sure you have great stories that reflect your experience. Not everyone is a great storyteller. Make sure you work with someone. Enhance your stories. Practice them. And that will be extremely helpful on an interview. The second point is when you go to the interview, are you calm, or are you stressed? And if you're going to interviews and you're repeatedly stressed, that's something you should solve. And there are many ways and many approaches. Obviously, ideally, you should work on yourself so that you get to a point where you'll understand that nothing's worth stressing for. But then even before getting to that point, there are many effective ways and many shortcuts where you can get rid of that stress. Again, work with someone. There's many approaches, many ways, and it's something that you can overcome easily. There's not a single way of eliminating stress, but there are many ways, all valid, and they all work. And again, work with someone who help you overcome that stress. That way, when you go to an interview, you are calm. That's very, very important. So communication, having great communication is important, and the way you tell your stories reflect your level of communication. Being calm on an interview is very important. The other thing, are you I hear the expressions like culture fit, he's a fit, he's not a fit, these kind of expressions, and these things mean different things to different people, to different companies. Like, for example, at Amazon, they say he's an Amazonian, or at this company. So every company has a culture, and because I haven't worked on the recruitment side, I work with engineers and I help them get jobs. So I may not have an excellent understanding of what culture is, but in my opinion, your ability to connect with the hiring manager and the recruiter will ensure that you are perceived as a fit. Meaning, if you like the hiring manager, if you like the recruiter, and if they also like you, that's very important. So number one, communication, having great stories to demonstrate you are a communicator. So the stories aren't only about telling them about your experience. The stories are also about demonstrating that you have the ability to tell great stories to reflect your experience, which means you are a communicator, which means you which means you can communicate well on the job. So having great stories is important. Being calm when you're going to the interview is very important, and your ability to connect with recruiters and hiring managers, meaning that you like them and they like you. That's important. So, so if a recruiter is not telling you anything about a job and just sending you an email saying, hey, send me your resume, you don't send your resume because your resume has value. You shouldn't just be sending it left and right to everyone who's asking for it. So if a recruiter is sending you a resume asking you for a job, asking you for your resume, sending you an email asking you for your resume, or asking you questions from the very first 5 minutes of the interview, asking you questions that imply that you're not the best candidate for the job, that's someone you cannot build a connection with. So you are better off ending the interview and investing your time on something else because time is valuable. Time is the most precious resource. So you can end the interview right there, um, in a friendly way, in a nice way, and invest your time on another interview or another project or go learn something. And the reason I say that is if the recruiter is not being friendly and building connection with you from the very first few minutes, it's not going to be easy for you to build a connection with them. And if you're not building a connection with them, even if you have the great stories and you are calm, chances are you're not going to get the job because the likability factor is not there. The connection is not there. You cannot build a connection with someone who does not want to build a connection. Thank you.